Hello there, friends, and welcome back to Living on the Verge. This one is one that really struck me, and after having some time to process it, I thought, this is a perfect one for the podcast. Have you ever learned one new piece of information that it didn't change what happened, but completely changed what you thought it meant? Hang in there with me. I'm going to tell you what I mean, because this happened to me recently. I had been carrying some real, very, very real hurt. And along with it, a story about what that hurt said about someone that I love. Then I had one conversation, learned something I didn't know, and suddenly the entire story changed. I mean, it was earth-shattering, literally knocked the equilibrium right out of me for a few seconds. Now, to be clear, the event itself did not change. The things I had seen, they didn't disappear. The feelings I had were real. But what changed was that I finally understood what had been happening outside of my line of sight. And if it feels like I'm mincing words or hemming and hawing a little bit, you're probably right. And this is where I want to be careful, because this story also belongs partly to someone else. I'm going to protect that person and the details, but the reason I bring it to you and the reason I wanted to share is because the realization within the story, that belongs to me. And the lesson that came out of it for me, I think that lesson may belong to many of us. So let's get into it. Essentially, what happened was I had mistaken the absence of a visible gesture for the absence of love. I had started to believe that this person did not care, or that maybe I did not matter the way I thought I mattered to them. Well, this went on for a while, but what I eventually learned was almost the exact opposite. This person, in fact, cared deeply. They had stepped forward in an incredibly meaningful and generous way. They had simply done it quietly, without needing attention or recognition or looking for any credit. And you know what? Giving with a quiet heart is one of the qualities that I admire most. So today, I want to talk about it with you. I want to talk about what happens when the hurt is real. I want to get into, okay, the hurt is real, but the story explaining the hurt, it's incomplete. We don't have all the facts. And I also want to share with you what I have learned and what it means to trust what the people who love us have consistently shown us about who they are. This was really something else for me. This entire situation really opened my eyes and made me look not just at this situation, but at a lot of things very differently. And so I want to share the story with you. There was someone I love deeply whose behavior surrounding a sort of important occasion kind of hurt me. You know, they seemed aloof, and I couldn't see any obvious acknowledgments and nothing visible that said, you matter to me. I'm thinking about you. I'm here and I understand that this moment matters. And gosh, I was so hurt. And because I could not see it, I began to believe it wasn't there. At first, I was disappointed. Wow. What happened? Then I became confused. This doesn't make much sense. My mind couldn't wrap itself around it. But then the confusion started attaching itself to a much more painful idea, if I'm being honest. And it was hard to admit, but the idea was this. Maybe I did not matter to this person as much as I believed I did. That's a hard sentence to admit, you guys, because when you love someone and believe they love you, maybe I do not matter. It doesn't remain just a small passing thought, right? You tend to think about it more and more, and it begins to touch history, and it begins to touch expectations, and it begins touching all those vulnerable places where we wonder whether we've misunderstood a relationship. I found myself looking for something visible that would reassure me. And for the first time, this is not in my nature. I'm usually a kind of live and let people show you who they are kind of person. But I even pushed a little. And I went as far as to ask what this person was doing for me. And that was unusual for me. It tells you how unsettled I had become. I wasn't really asking about a thing. I was, I think, asking or searching, just sort of looking for evidence. I wanted something concrete, something I could hold on to and point to and say, you know what? This is it. There, I told you. That proves I matter. Now, when I first was disappointed, I thought, you're blowing this out of proportion. This is not necessarily what you think it is. And, you know, for a while there, I was able to rationalize that and I was able to put it off. But then the confusion, the idea that, do I really know this person like I think that I know them? Do they know me well enough to know how this whole thing is being interpreted? I mean, the thoughts went on and on because this happened over a period of time. It wasn't just a, couple of hours situation. And I just remember thinking, I think that this isn't really confusion. This is me fearing that they don't give a damn. And I even went as far, like I said, as stepping outside of my comfort zone and kind of clarifying, hey, just making sure. And there was no takeaway. It was the weirdest, most unsettling thing. And so before we go any further, I do want to say very clearly that the hurt that I was feeling was real. I am not going to rewrite myself as silly or say I was being over dramatic now that I know more. I was responding to what I could see and also to what I could not see. But I did something very human. And it's funny, but I am finding myself very comfortable just being human, just asking the questions I don't know the answers to, or just being vulnerable and saying, hey, I would love to be a part of. And that is something that is relatively new to me at this stage in life. And I'm kind of loving it. But and so in my very human moment, I moved from, I just don't understand this, to, I know what this means. Okay, you guys, those aren't the same sentence. I do not understand leaves the story open, right? It leaves room for interpretation. I know what this means closes it. It wraps it up in a neat little package. And once I closed it, well, once I drew my own closing to the story, then the conclusions that I had reached began collecting evidence. I mean, it had to, right? Where else do we go with this? What happened next is something I truly think many of us do. I did not simply feel hurt. I went a step further. I decided I was going to begin explaining the hurt to myself, right? Have you ever done this? You rationalize, you start justifying, you start talking yourself through the situation. And so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, this person does not care. Maybe I do not matter as much as I believe I did. And once that explanation took hold, everything I saw seemed to support it. The aloofness, the absence of any obvious gesture, everything supported this narrative I had built in my own head. Even things that were totally innocuous and that might have been completely neutral began to feel like evidence. I knew it. See, that's another reason. It was just the biggest mindfuck. I mean, I was playing a massive game of strategy from beginning to end, all by myself in my own little narrative in my mind. And, you know, that's the strange power of an explanation. Once it gives our pain a reason, it automatically starts feeling like it's fact. We make it the truth. It may not be the truth, but you better bet you believing that it's our truth, right? I knew what I had seen. What I did not know was everything that had happened quietly. Okay, for purposes of clarity, this distinction matters because sometimes we're absolutely right about how something made us feel, and we're still wrong, completely categorically wrong about what it meant. Those are two truths that can coexist. Both things can be true. Think about it. The feeling tells us what happened inside of us, but it doesn't automatically tell us what happened inside of another person. It doesn't know every conversation, every decision, every unseen action, every moment that you weren't there for, every private act of love. We don't get that vantage point. And yet, when we are hurt, uncertainty, oh my gosh, it can feel unbearable, right? An explanation, even if it's a painful one, can feel easier than not knowing. And I always say, like, tell me, because the truth in my mind is way worse than what you're going to say. I always live by that. Our imaginations are wild, and it's because they don't have guardrails. They're endless. And so it's easier to make up a whole narrative in our mind than it is to not know. They don't care. That hurts, right? It's a conclusion, though. and you can close the case. And then that gives you your next plan of action. Now you have something definite that you could react to. I mean, let's talk about the difference between fact, a feeling, and an interpretation, right? The fact is something didn't happen. The feeling is you're hurt. But the interpretation is it didn't happen because they don't care. And that's the interesting way that our minds can play tricks on us if we're not careful enough and we rush to provide our own ending to the story. And the problem was not that I had feelings. The problem was that I had taken a handful of visible facts and built an entire story around them because the story explained why I was hurting. It felt complete. Haha, it was not complete. Oh gosh, you guys. Then only a few days ago, I had a conversation and I learned something I had not known. I found out that this same person, this very person that I was so convinced did not care, had quietly stepped forward in an incredibly meaningful and generous way. They had been among the first to help. They did not need to be asked. And the biggest, wildest part, they never announced it to me. And apparently, they had no intention of making sure I knew. And I have to take a minute because the moment I heard that, well, you guys, the entire story changed. I mean, the things I had interpreted as indifference suddenly looked different. The missing visible gesture was all of a sudden no longer proof that I did not matter. Gone. Poof, just like that. There had been an enormous gesture. I simply had not been able to see it. And you know what? Here's the best, most touching, fantastic part. This person had done it with a quiet heart. No performance, no need to receive credit, no attempt to make the act about themselves and steal the moment. And oh my gosh, I get choked up when I think about it. That's the part that went straight to my heart because quiet generosity is one of my favorite qualities in another person. I love when someone does something kind because it is kind, not because they need room to know that they were the one who did it. You know what I mean? I had been waiting for love to arrive in a form that I could recognize. Meanwhile, love had already shown up in a form that I deeply respected and that I admire so very much. And I can't tell you, when I had this moment of conversation and I discovered this realization, I immediately just had this huge weight lifted off of my shoulders and a pit that was sitting in my stomach that I wasn't even really completely, totally aware of, immediately disappeared. The relief was just immediate. And the need to reach out to this person was something I had to do right away. I immediately had to reach out and explain that I had just found out about what a fantastic thing they had done. I mean, sheesh, that was like the very first thing I thought to do, right? I reached out immediately. I did not want another hour to pass with me holding the old story in my head or even out there in the universe after I had been given the truth. And when I tell you I felt relief, it was instantaneous. But you know what else I felt? I felt humbled, truly humbled, not humiliated, humbled. There's a difference. Humiliation says you were so foolish to feel anything, right? You big dummy, you were wrong about it all. You should feel humiliated. No, 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 no. Humility says, you know what? You didn't know everything. I had not discovered a different person. In fact, I had been reminded of the person I already knew. Nothing about what this person had done changed in that conversation. I mean, right? The generous act had already happened. Their heart had already been expressed. The only thing that changed was what I knew. And what I knew changed everything. Sheesh, I'm telling you, after the relief, one thought stayed with me. And this is the biggest lesson for me of this entire situation. I wish I had trusted what I already knew about this person. I knew their heart. I knew their character. I knew the way they love. But being human in one painful, confusing moment, I let what I could not see become more powerful than everything the relationship had already shown me. And I'm blown away when I think about that. Now, that doesn't mean I should have ignored my feelings and like, oh, next time, then don't be hurt. No, it does not mean that we get to just give everybody an unlimited benefit of the doubt, right? It doesn't mean that we should explain away repeated neglect or disrespect or bad behavior or any patterns that keep hurting us. Trust is not pretending. Trust is not abandoning discernment. Trust is built from evidence over time. And here's the thing. When someone has earned that trust, when their life has repeatedly shown us love, generosity, and care, well, then one confusing moment should not automatically erase the accumulated evidence of the whole entire relationship. Feelings that arise in one moment do not always know as much as a relationship has taught us over time, right? That line, think about it. You know what? I'm going to say it again. Feelings that arise in one moment do not always know as much as a relationship has taught us over time. Isn't that true? My feelings knew that I could not see a gesture. My relationship knew more. My history with this person knew more. My instincts about their heart knew more. And so I've been thinking about this and I think, could I have done anything different? Would I change anything? Well, everybody can see in hindsight. But I do wish I had paused at, I do not understand. Instead of immediately rushing to, well, I guess I don't matter. And I really should have known better because this person has consistently over time just shown me love, been there for me at some of the hardest moments in my life, known when I just needed a hug, made me laugh when we just needed to laugh. And so, as it turns out, sometimes trusting our instincts about the people we love means trusting a concern. But sometimes it means trusting the goodness we've repeatedly witnessed in those people, right? Even if that one moment remains confusing. The lesson is not always assume the best. I think the lesson might be do not let one incomplete moment automatically outweigh a relationship's complete record, right? Don't let one moment of confusion automatically erase everything you know to be true about this person. And when I learned the truth, I did not have to invent a kinder version of this person. The kinder version was already real. I simply had not seen what they had done. There's another part of this that matters. What we do when the fuller truth arrives. So let's chat about that for a second here. Sometimes we become attached to an interpretation because we've already suffered inside. We've replayed it. We've cried over it. So why change what we believe now, right? We've already been through it. We may have discussed it or called a friend or talked to a spouse or a coworker or even quietly rearranged the relationship around it. If we change our minds, then that can feel like admitting that all of those feelings and everything that we did was for naught. It was invalid because it wasn't real. But new information does not require us to shame the person we were before we had it. We can't do that to ourselves. It just requires that we update the story in our head, right? The story, whether made up, inferred, or otherwise thrown together, to me was still my truth. And so it's not for me to say I didn't deserve to be hurt or to shame myself as the person who believed what she did before we had all of this new information. No, I update the story and I can still honor that version of me who felt hurt, but I could allow the version of me who now knows more to tell a better, fuller story. And so I don't think I was wrong about being hurt, but I was so wrong about what I thought the hurt proved. That realization does not erase the experience. It transforms it. Think about it. Instead of carrying evidence that I did not matter, I now carry a beautiful example of quiet love. And instead of remembering only what appeared absent, I get to remember what had been present all along. And that is a much more faithful record of this person's heart. Maybe there's a conclusion in your life that deserves another look, right? I don't know, but think about it. I think every one of us has some sort of an example, and it's not because your feelings are wrong, not because every painful situation has a hidden, beautiful explanation, and not because you owe endless grace to people who have repeatedly shown you otherwise. But if someone has earned your trust over time, perhaps one unclear moment deserves more of a question mark before it receives a period, right? Let's ask ourselves, should I wait for more information? And maybe try to dissuade ourselves from building the narrative in our own mind. And so it's that time when I'm going to give you a little something to think about here. I want you to think of one relationship, any relationship, but just make sure that it's one with a trustworthy history, nothing with harmful patterns or any triggering nature. Just ask yourself about that relationship. You got it in your head? Ask yourself if you've ever been in a situation where one confusing moment has been allowed to define more than it should. Ask yourself, what do I know for certain? What did I feel? What meaning did I attach to it? And what has this person consistently shown me over time? Take the time to do that. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to that relationship. Because sometimes the pain is real, but the story explaining it is incomplete. And what stays with me is not simply what I misunderstood or the notion that I had misunderstood something. It is what had been happening outside my line of sight. While I was looking for evidence that I mattered, someone I love had already quietly shown that I mattered without asking for recognition and without making the gesture about themselves. I almost missed the beauty of that because I was looking for love to arrive in a form that I could see. And oh my gosh, I am so grateful that I learned the truth. I am grateful I could reach out immediately, and I'm grateful that I was given the chance to replace, well, I guess I don't matter, with what was actually true. I mattered. And not only did I matter, but I mattered enough for someone to step forward quietly, generously, and without needing me to know. When I finally learned what had happened, I did not discover a different person. I was reminded of the person I already knew. And so the lesson for me is to trust my instincts about the people I love and the people I know love me, not blindly and not in spite of repeated evidence. But when someone has earned my trust over time, I never again want one confusing moment to erase everything their life has already shown me. So you do not have to deny what you felt. You do not have to shame yourself for what you believed with the information you had. But when the fuller truth arrives, let it arrive. Let it soften you. And let it change the story. Because sometimes love is visible, and sometimes love has a quiet heart. And until then, I'll be right here, living on the verge.